Hi there guys, and welcome to today's live stream. We're going to be talking all about the hip hinge, how it can help you, a little bit about how we fed it into the Back in Shape program. I know it's one that many of you guys that are in phase 3 will really find different compared to the other exercises, but it's a really important one for you guys to get to grips with. So hopefully you guys are going to find today's live stream really helpful. If you have any questions about this, maybe you're in phase 1, maybe you're in phase 2, maybe you're in phase 3 and you're not quite sure about how to do this exercise, or other issues relating to your back pain, then please do post those in the comments below. Remember that when you're watching this live, there's a slight delay, so do ask those questions before we get to the end. Otherwise, sometimes I know people are watching and then we see the comments afterwards saying, oh, I missed putting my question in. So please do get those comments in as we're going through. And with that being said, let's get into today's live stream. So as always, if you are new to the live streams, then please do consider subscribing. If you're watching on YouTube, hitting the notification bell so you know when we go live and when we release a new video. So the hip hinge, a really important one. I don't know if you guys can see, but just down here, this little guy here is definitely not doing a hip hinge. Now, the reason that the hip hinge is really important, to understand that, we need to come back to what's causing our back pain, what's building our back pain up over the years, over the months and over the weeks, and maybe what's stopping it getting better. And all too often, we find that a lot of people, through inactivity, maybe we're sitting down for extended periods of time during the day, or maybe we're just not stretching enough on a daily basis or active enough in general, we start to find this sort of bending pattern starts to creep in. And it's really, if I show you guys what I'm talking about, it's really bending round like so. Whenever we go down to pick something up, we bend with our lower back, we flex our lower back and cause that compression. And if you've been on any of our 145, 46, 47 live streams or seen any of our other videos, you know that it's the compression that really is the predominant factor when it comes to lower back pain, which can be made worse by other things. And it's the compression or recurrent compression over time that creates things like disc bulges, stenosis and other issues that lead to your lower back pain or sciatica. And what's happening here when we're doing these movements is we're squashing down on the front part of the vertebra, creating a backwards trajectory. So if we draw up on the board up here, we have our little disc and we've got the bones there at the top part of the board, and then as we bend forwards, the two front parts move together towards one another, and that makes the nucleus in the middle of that disc want to drive backwards through the path of least resistance. That's putting your socks on. It's bending down to pick up that heavy box in the way that this guy here is demonstrating just down there. It's rounding the back, and if we can really eliminate that, then we're going to do an awful lot better. And that's where the hip hinge comes in. For a lot of you, bending like this will be the norm. It may have been the norm for the last 3, 4, 5, 10 years or longer. And that's why the back pain is sometimes so difficult, because instinctively we just bend down to pick that thing up. We just bend down to put our socks on. We're not quite as cautious. And I was having a fantastic conversation with one of the guys the other day who was saying, since starting the Back in Shape, I'm so much more conscious about going down on one knee, those sorts of things to keep that spine straight. And that's where the hip hinge comes in. It's using the hip hinge to allow us to bend effectively. Now, in terms of what a hip hinge actually is, I'm going to demonstrate to you guys in a moment, but we'll just show you guys with the little model, the little guy here. First and foremost, the bad technique, as I mentioned before, is bending from the lower back. We round that lower back and we lose it, and that puts tremendous compression, just like this little drawing at the top here. The discs, through the discs, particularly 4-5 is commonly one that will really be put under stress during this particular sort of movement or slouching. And then as we bend down, we then lift something and it puts further compression through the front of the discs. Now, if we compare that to a hip hinge, we keep the spine in a nice neutral stabilized structure. And as we bend down, we go like so. So the spine remains straight the whole way through. There's not the risk of it buckling under the load and those discs being damaged. That's a really important principle. So that's what we want to bear in mind. And what does that look like in a real person, not a little model? Well, I've already shown you guys the bend, that the inappropriate bend, it's coming down like that with or without a bit of a twist. But you can see my back here is rounding, and sorry for my head being chopped off here. But when we bend properly, you see the back of my spine here or lower back. As we bend with the hip hinge, we find that actually my spine remains nice and neutral. If we do it with straight legs, like in the actual hip hinge exercise, you can see that the position, I'm bending from the actual hip socket. When we look at this up here, we've got a little stickman drawing, and you can see in black we've got the starting position, and we're rotating around these hips. We are not rounding the back, we're bending from those hips. So if we're going to go down on one knee, then we're going to go down like so, keeping the spine nice and neutral. And that's really what provides stability and protection for your lower back. Now, before I get into how this fits together in the back in shape, and how you've maybe been learning already how to do these things, but maybe help you understand the process as well, there's one thing I want to get to, and maybe why you might be thinking, oh well, why don't you talk about this a little bit more in the first instances of back in shape? And that is, doing a hip hinge, put it down here, still increases compression through our spine. As we bend forwards like so, there is going to have to be an increase in compression through the spine. The difference is it's symmetrical when we maintain this nice neutral curve. Our spine is in the strongest load-bearing position when we do a hip hinge, so that we're not exploiting maybe this little disc bulge back here and making it worse. We've got a nice neutral position to the spine. And if we are going to be increasing compression as we go through a hip hinge movement in order to build those muscles and grain in that movement pattern. So you'll notice when I do it, it's very, very mechanical. It's bang and bang. We're going straight down. There's not wobbly and, oh, there we are, or that sort of thing. It's got to be mechanical, second nature. You don't think about it. And that's where the hip hinge really comes in, so that you can start to learn to do these activities subconsciously. So if you're going down to have to empty the dishwasher, you bend properly. That's what catches so many people out and leads the back pain to build up over the years, is that they're not doing these things subconsciously. So if we go into the phase 1, 2, and 3, well, why on earth would we do something that increases the loading through our spine in phase 1? Not the right thing to do. You've got the injury. The injury is fresh. If you've watched any of the other information on the back in shape, you guys are going to know that we don't want to be putting too much stress through the spine at that stage. Our main focus is alleviating the pressure on those joints, and also a little bit of hip mobility, and learning to engage the core, learning to keep this midsection here stable, learning to actually just get the muscles to work. A lot of people really struggle to get these muscles to work even at all in the first instance, and the core engagement exercise is something that you can almost see the loading screen going as they're trying to get the engagement. They're breathing wrong and those sorts of things, and that's understandable. A lot of people don't have the ability, or have lost the ability, because it's a natural way of breathing, a natural way of using our core. We lose that as we go through our sort of early teen years, and we start to suck our tummy in and breathe incorrectly, and therefore then engaging the core is a very difficult thing to do. Quite often people will breathe in to suck it in, when actually we should breathe out to draw it in. And that's a really important distinction. So we have to learn first how to engage the core, otherwise we're going to do this and wobble over and we're going to hurt ourselves. Then in phase 2, we have to learn how to brace with movements, and we do this off weight bearing in most cases, with a little bit of weight bearing later on. But we're doing that focus on engaging the core now with a little bit more strength and building up that strength. And that's an important part, and sometimes that takes a bit of time to get through that phase 2 process of building a bit of strength in the core, so it's more resilient to being pulled off in different directions. It can hold you steady, because all too often it might be you're making good recovery with your back pain and your rehab, and you're going well, and then we miss a curb and we step, and all of a sudden our big upper body wobbles off to the side, and boom, it catches the back again. Whereas if we've got some good competence through here, our core will quickly engage and catch us before we have a chance to fall over or to do any serious damage to the lower back. So that's a really important pivotal part. And then in phase 3, we start to more objectively work on this. We start to work a little bit with unilateral exercises, where we're doing a little bit of a hip hinge type movement in things like the lunges, to really start to build up a little bit more dynamic strength as we're moving our body into slightly different positions and challenging our core a little bit more. And then in that additional workout, we start to add in the actual hip hinge itself as an objective exercise to really build all of those posterior chain muscles, the muscles that run down our back from really our shoulder blades all the way down, including our glutes, and then down the hamstrings and calves, so they can all work as one synergistic unit of muscle to protect our lower back when we're doing lifting, alongside a really natural movement of just pivoting from the hips. And that's the one thing really from today's live stream. Before we get into Q&A, I want you guys to take away from this is learn to do this movement well when you get into that phase 3. Once it's ingrained and it's just a natural process, you've really made a big step towards dealing with back pain properly and really dramatically reducing the likelihood of getting any relapses in the future for no apparent reason, because you'll have that natural movement pattern using the hip hinge, whether we're going down on one knee in the garden, whether we're bending over to empty the dishwasher in the house, or whether we're going up and downstairs and lifting boxes. We'll have that natural default movement pattern that just looks effortless. And you see this in sport. You see tennis players, cricket players, you see golf players, you see rugby players, etc. Or you see, all sorts of different sports. You watch someone do it and everything just looks effortless. The movement looks effortless and subconscious. And this is a hip hinge, and every single one of you guys watching this video will be able to get there no matter what's going on. It just takes a bit of time and a bit of practice to maybe unlearn some bad things that we've learned over the years. So that's pretty much it from me today. We'll go into Q&A.
Okay, brilliant. Good morning, everybody. Please do keep your questions coming in. Mandy has asked here, should your knees bend a bit when doing a hip hinge?
Yeah, I think actually bending the knees slightly. I would not want you to have straight locked out legs. If your legs are locked out completely straight, that's going to be a problem. It's not stable for the knees. Remember, those legs are just, we've got the femur bone, the upper thigh bone, and the lower spine, the tibia. It's just a little stick. If we don't have a little bend, we need to have a little bend to engage all of those muscles. If we're locked straight, then it's not necessarily so good. So always a slight kink. You'll probably see that on the video instructions, the videos of me doing it. There is a slight kink, but what you need to do is, if you bend your knees too much during the movement, it turns into a squat. So we do want to keep the knee bend, although it may be slightly off 180, maybe 160 degrees at the knee. We need to keep that same angle the whole way through the exercise as the top is going up and down. Really, if we demo here on the little guy, because you guys can't see my knees, maybe a slight bend like so. So we've got a slight bend, and then that stays still as we're going up and down like that, not bending at the same time, because that's turning into more of a squat. You're not going to find it engages quite as well if you're doing that. You really should feel, as you get towards the bottom, you should really feel it kicking in those hamstrings in particular as they go boom. We've got you, that's as far as you can go. And as you go through obviously the flexibility program, Mandy, you'll notice that point starts to go a bit further, and obviously you've got the testing as well, that you'll see that on the photos.
Yeah, Mandy did say, she said, I think Michael's answered my question. I can see that he is clearly bending at the knees. Just how far should we bend?
How far?
Yes.
So that's the last point. And in terms of how far we should bend at the knees, as I said, just a small kink in the knees. How far should we bend from the hip, the actual hip hinge part of that, until your hamstrings kick in? You should find that your hamstrings will be the things that stop you, because the hamstrings limit that forward flexion. So you'll feel something go straight into the hamstrings and they'll go boom. And that's as far as you can go, and that's your range. And as I mentioned, as we improve the flexibility in our hamstrings and make progress on the flexibility protocol in phase 3, you guys are going to find that actually you can go a little bit further with time, which means you can build strength in a more precarious position, or a greater range of motion, which is really, really important.
Okay, brilliant. Mandy says, thanks, that's clear. If somebody has got hip pain,
yeah,
should they still be able to do the hip hinge?
Yeah, because quite a lot of time, so when we're talking about degenerative change in the hip joints, it's an arthritis and those sorts of things, we actually lose extension first, which is the backward bending movement. So things like lunge exercises where we're doing maybe the hip flexor stretch will actually be the ones that are most difficult, because of the way in which this moves the hip socket and works with the actual hip joint itself. So hip hinges shouldn't be too challenging, even with someone with a hip issue, be it osteoarthritic, etc. It's something that shouldn't be too much trouble.
Okay, brilliant. Just having a look to see if there's any.
The main bit it'll hurt in a hip hinge person with osteoarthritis, it'll actually, the sorest bit will be as they come up to straight and their hip moves closest to extension. A lot of people with hip issues, particularly very degenerative hips, will be stuck in that sort of position. Now they're kind of not quite straight, they're not able to stand up straight. So as you're doing your hip hinge, you might find that bit's okay, but it's when you get to that bit, that last little bit where this hip socket is closing up, that's when it'll be painful. And I would suggest really maybe working to the edge of that within a tolerable degree, because what happens in hip arthritis, and we're going off topic a little bit here, but if we can start off straight, for example, Okay, and because of the way in which we're operating and doing things on a daily basis, we spend too much time sitting. So all of a sudden that becomes the status quo, and straight becomes painful. So we really stop here, and then over time this becomes painful. So we stop here, and we just avoid, and then we're just stuck in a chair all day. So we really want to be mindful of actually when it comes to this sort of thing. The reason the joint is often degenerate is because it's not had the adequate bathing of synovial fluid through the whole joint surfaces, and actually moving that through a full range of motion, maybe not quite that far, that's a little bit extreme, will be actually very helpful in delaying the degenerative process through that particular joint.
Brilliant. That's very useful. Okay, awesome. I think that's... Oh no, hang on. Cheryl's just come in with a question here.
Yes, guys, if you do have your questions, just before Lara gets to Cheryl's question, please do post them in the comments below. I know sometimes with the explanations you guys are thinking, oh, what's the explanation? But do please post those in the comments below.
Okay, so Cheryl has said, my hip is one of my biggest problems. I'll find out today if I have a labral tear or not. I actually have a follow-up with rheumatology a year after my scan. Am I okay to still carry on doing things like the dead bugs, etc.? It hurts all the time, resting, walking, etc. I don't want to make it worse.
Yeah, the thing with a labral tear is there's not a lot you can really do about it, and a lot of times it's just trying to play around with the particular angle that you're going out with when you're doing, like, for example, the dead bugs, etc. It's kind of trying to play around with this angle a little bit to just avoid that labral tear. They are really a pain, and they're the sorts of things where the surgeons will generally say, look, do you want us to operate on it and remove it, or do you want to just work through it and work with your rehab? And ultimately providing more stability for that hip socket is going to be a more helpful tool. It's just unfortunate that it is going to be uncomfortable. You will actually find that if you can play around with the angle, there will be some positions which are a little bit easier, but reducing the range of motion when you're doing the strengthening work will actually be the most helpful thing to start with, and then building it back up. So try and find what we can do with minimal pain, and that's the starting point. Maybe it's a dead bug, maybe it's a marching bridge, maybe it's a squat, and then work around that. Because at the end of the day, if we've got a hip tear, you're still getting up and down out of the chair, you're still doing all those other things. So why not do some safe, sensible exercises at the same time, which will actually build that area, rather than going, oh, I'm not going to do any of those exercises, but I'm still going to have to go up and down the stairs, I'm still getting in and out of the sofa, I'm doing all those other things. We really need to provide more stability, and that kind of comes alongside the snapping hip syndrome that we saw the other week when we did the live stream on that, and hip impingement. With these sorts of issues, you often find, and I think Mandy mentioned the other day in the Facebook group, that actually some of the clicking and clunking as she's gone through the program decreases, and that's very, very common. As we improve the quality of these muscles around the hip, the integrity and the strength, the stability and the functionality of the hip will actually improve the same way it does in our lower back as well.
And just remind me, a labral tear, is that when you've got a tag?
No, essentially what we've got in the hip is really, you've got kind of the hip socket here, and then the ball is in the middle, and then we've also the labrum is like an extra bit of cartilage that just makes the socket a little bit deeper. So it's not really involved in the weight bearing process per se, but if there's a little bit of a taggy bit here, yeah, then you're going to constantly flick over it when you're doing certain movements, and at the end of the day, there's not a lot they're really going to do about it, because we've had patients in the clinic with these sorts of things, and they go to the surgeon. It's a case of, well, we could remove it, but sometimes they'll go down the route of injections just to try and allow you to ignore it a little bit, but really improving the competence of that hip. Because what happens is when we don't have competence in these joints, be it in the shoulder, the hip, the lumbar spine, it allows our body to be wobbly, to be less composed, and that's when injuries happen. Because if there's less support over this hip socket holding it in place, it's more likely that it's going to twang onto one of these cartilage bits, same thing in our lower back, and catch something. And really the only way to go forwards with these sorts of things is going to be trying to build up the strength and stability in that segment, which we can all do, whether it's the hip, whether it's the knee, etc. We can all improve the strength and stability in these muscles, and that's really the most direct way going forwards. It's just a case of trying to find the right place to start in terms of an offset between actually getting something done and it being too painful to carry on. And what I would suggest is things like the treat protocol are so important here. Being able to honestly evaluate, look, my labral tear is bothering me. It bothers me periodically through the day, and I'm going to do my exercises and it hurts during the exercises, at periods during the exercises. But then over the next few days, or over the next day or the next 24 hours, is it meaningfully changing my overall symptoms in any material way, or is it still sore anyway? And if the answer is that, it's still sore anyway, it's not really changing too much, it's just sore when I do it, and it's sore the other times of the day anyway, then really pushing on to actually make some improvement is really the best way forwards. All too often people go, oh, it hurts, but nothing's really changing. The symptoms aren't really changing in any meaningful way, so they shy away from doing activities, and then definitely over the course of time it slowly slips and slides to become a problem that's more and more difficult as we lose strength and stability for that joint.
Okay, awesome. Cheryl said thank you. Please do let us know how it goes, Cheryl. When you go and see the rheumatologist. Mandy,
I'm not sure why there's a rheumatologist with reference to a labral tear though. That's not really a rheumatology problem. That's a sort of orthopedic problem.
I think it might be two different things. So she'll find out about the labral tear and she's going to have a rheumatology follow-up, I believe. Okay, that makes sense. So just let us know how it goes, Cheryl. Mandy just agreed. She said no clunking at all now. It was horrendous when I started. Oh,
it's horrible. It really is horrible. It just throws you so much. You think that cannot be good, but it's just those tendons and things flicking over all sorts of bits and pieces. It's a bit nasty, to say the least.
Okay, brilliant. I think that is everything then for today. Thanks, everybody. We hope that was helpful.
Thanks so much for joining us, guys. Hopefully you did find today's live stream helpful. If you're watching this after the fact, then please do post any comments or questions you've got in the comment section. We'll be sure to answer those, maybe on another live stream or maybe in the comment section below. So thanks so much for joining us, guys. We are going to have some more announcements over the next few days as we reach that 150 live streams. We're going to be changing things up, so we'll have more details to follow. So thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow with another live stream. Thanks so much for joining us on today's video. Hopefully you found it packed full of useful information. If you want to learn more about the premium Back in Shape membership, there's going to be a video somewhere underneath here. And if you want to stay up to date or tune in to some of our more recent live streams and the Q&As at the end of those, then that's going to be down here. And remember, you can subscribe to the channel up here and hit the notification bell to make sure you know when we next go live, so you can join us for our next live stream and Q&A.